Back to the double leg. I'm one half of the show. Hey, Jai Picks, the other half of the show, the parlay. Joining me in to break down some UFC Vegas 69. How we doing tonight?
Good, man. Ready to break down some fights. Ready to give our input and get back on the right track after last weekend's UFC 284. These are the type of cards you win money on, though. I mean, these are, not a lot of big names. People don't know these fighters as well. And I think, sometimes you can get some lines that are a little misconstrued and aren't exactly accurate and take advantage. So that's what we're going to do this week.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty with a lot of these fighters. Fairly low-level card, but we're going to do our best to give you our input on it and give you our predictions. So, as always, leave a like, comment, and a subscription down below if you're new to the channel. And this is the double leg, the apex for everything you need to know about the UFC. This week, UFC Vegas 69. And if you want to get in on the action, you can join the double leg premium, $19.99 a month, less than $1 a day. Gets you everything you need to know about the UFC card for the whole month, $30 or 30 days membership. And one last thing, you can join the Facebook group. The pot will be at $80 this week. So we give away, we add $20 to the pot every week. And if you hit a plus 500 play on that week's card, you win the whole pot. Next week will be $80. So, I mean, that's nothing to overlook there. We will get right into it, though. We don't want to take too much of your time with the main event. A little change here with the main event. Jessica Andrade stepping in for Taila Santos. Erin Blanchfield comes in as a plus 145 underdog. Jessica Andrade sitting at minus 145. A little action coming in on Erin Blanchfield. Over-under set at 2.5 rounds. Dead even. Odds are courtesy of BetOpenly, as always. The best fight odds out there. Erin Blanchfield 10-1. Jessica Andrade 24-9. Fought less than a month ago at UFC 283 and put a beating on Lauren Murphy. 4-1 in her last 5. The only losses to the champ Valentina Shevchenko. And Erin Blanchfield coming off the big submission win over Molly McCann. Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, it's kind of tough because, I've been looking at Erin Blanchfield and really liking her in her previous matchup, and then all of a sudden it gets dumped on her head. We get Jessica Andrade, and that just throws a huge curveball into everything because, I mean, based off of Jessica Andrade's last performances, how do you even bet against her? So I think this fight could kind of give us an idea of where Erin Blanchfield is as far as a contender, as a prospect, going forward in the division. Because, I mean, what she did to Molly McCann and previous opponents, I mean, she's looked like a world beater, the next girl in line to challenge for the title in that division. But now you're getting Jessica Andrade, who, if you're not going to be able to get the takedown against her, she's going to piece you up on the feet. I mean, we saw that against Lauren Murphy. There's not many women in the division that can stand and bang with her unless you're the champ. But I think this fight all comes down to if Erin Blanchfield can get those takedowns, what she can even do with it, because we know Andrade is skilled with her submissions. She's one of the most well-rounded fighters in the division. I mean, that standing arm triangle against Lemos was sick. She's beaten Rose Namajunas, which, I mean, what was this? What was the score against Lauren Murphy? Was it 50-44? Or sorry. 30-25?
Yeah, I think there was a 30-25 on there.
Two 10-8s, and
yeah.
I mean, just absolutely annihilator, was never in any trouble, and that fight could have been stopped multiple times. So, that being said, Jessica Andrade sitting right under minus 150. I want to get there really, really bad. But it's like, so far, Erin Blanchfield hasn't really shown us anything that makes her deserving of being an underdog. But again, man, you're going in there against one of the toughest killers of the division in Andrade. So yeah, right now I'd have to lean towards Andrade for my pick. I think if she can stuff the takedowns, Erin Blanchfield's in for a long night on the feet. But I do think at the end of the day, this fight's going to tell us a ton about Blanchfield, how good she really is at this level. And Andrade, if she beats Erin Blanchfield here, I mean, she's got to be in the title mix with what she's done lately.
Yeah, I would agree. Erin, I've always liked Erin Blanchfield. I think she's very talented mixed martial artist, and she's going to be good in the flyweight division for years to come. She's only 23. So, I mean, she's my age. born in 1999.
You guys are young.
We are. She's coming off the submission win over Molly McCann, and a lot of people that was kind of her coming out party. A lot of people didn't really know who she was, and she was a big favorite in that fight, and people were like, well, I mean, you're getting, plus 330, plus 350 on Molly McCann. That's looking pretty good, but I could not fall for it there. I knew with Molly McCann's ground game was not going to stand up against Erin Blanchfield. And then she had a fight against JJ Aldrich last summer, and I went back and rewatched that fight again. She lost the first round pretty much against JJ Aldrich on the feet, and then ultimately got the standing guillotine choke in round 2. So that one's a little alarming as far as if this fight plays out on the feet. I think most people can agree it's going to go to Jessica Andrade if it's a stand-up battle. Not many people are going to be able to outstrike Jessica Andrade. And then the win against Miranda Maverick was pretty good. Miranda Maverick is a solid mixed martial artist in the flyweight division as well. So decent win there. But overall, I mean, the level of competition for Blanchfield does not stack up at all compared to Jessica Andrade. Andrade has fought the best of the best, and she only loses to the best of the best. She beats everybody that she's supposed to beat. The only loss she's had as a favorite in the last 8 years is to Zhang Weili. She was a minus 160 favorite there. So nothing to hold your head about there. She's coming off 3 straight wins, 2 of them first-round finishes, and then the brutal decision win to Lauren Murphey. So could have easily been 3 finishes. So this price is a little... I would expect it to be wider in Andrade's favor, with the experience, how well she is on the feet. She's capable on the ground. I mean, she's no slouch on the ground, but maybe Blanchfield's ground game is just that next level that Vegas is respecting it that much. Andrade has a 73% takedown defense. She's a strong girl. She's a shorter girl as well. I mean, so she's 5'1", I think. 5'1". So, I mean, it's not necessarily easy to take down those shorter people, as we saw in the Volkanovski fight. Some little ball of muscle, pretty much. And I'm going to lean Andrade. I think she's a solid play this week. I think she should win this fight. The only thing that makes me hesitant is that she fought less than a month ago, and she's stepping in here on short notice. So those are the spots that get a little greasy because there's a lot of unknowns there. How good a shape is she in? Can she go 5 rounds? Is she in the condition? Or what did she do between her last fight and now? Has she been in the gym? Has she just been training like normal? What has she been doing? But I would trust that if she comes into this fight, or she took this fight, she's coming into it in good shape. She knows this is a big fight. It was pretty much a number 1 contenders fight for the flyweight division between Santos and Blanchfield. And so if she gets this win, she probably sets herself up for a title shot in the flyweight division if she wants it, or at least in that conversation. So I think Andrade is a solid play this week. And I would always back the experience. She's not super old. I mean, she's 31. She's not, later in her career where she doesn't really, this is her last chance or anything like that. She's got experience in the game and she still has a future ahead of her. So I like Andrade. I just don't think it's a good matchup for Blanchfield. I would have, given her a little bit more of a chance against Santos, because Santos doesn't have the stand-up that Andrade does, but also a very good mixed martial artist there. So I like Andrade in this one.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, she's so short to the ground too. She's going to be harder to take down. She's super strong. So yeah, the more you talk about it, the more I think about it. I do like Andrade a little more because of that 5-round experience factor too. I mean, what happens when Erin Blanchfield's shooting takedowns and only lands half of them, or doesn't get as many as she likes? Is she going to be tired by the 3rd round and have 2 more rounds where you got to stand with someone like Andrade? So yeah, man, it's kind of a tough situation, but The more I'm thinking about it, I kind of do like Andrade in this one. Just the experience factor, the strength, the boxing. So yeah, I think it all comes down for the takedowns for Blanchfield. And if it stays on the feet, Andrade could make it a long night for Erin. So I kind of like that spot thinking about it more.
As long as her hands are not broken from hitting Warren Murphy's face, then I like it, or at least her legs aren't like still bruised or there's no cracks in there or anything. Then I like Andrade. I mean, honestly, look at the price again. It looks like a pretty good price to me. I mean,
yeah,
you're betting on the experience, the level of competition, the more past victory, really. She has a lot more finishing ability on the feet. Blanchfield has good subs on the ground and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm always gonna back the experience. And what I know she is. We don't really know how good Blanchfield is. She's young. She could be really good. She could go out there and just get a takedown and sub her right away. But at this point, we don't really know that at this level.
Yeah. Yep.
The co-main event. The main event is pretty solid, but it really just falls off after that. Like, that's a high-level women's MMA fight, and then the rest of them, a little tough. I got to say. The co-main event between Zach Pauga and Jordan Wright. Zach Pauga sitting at minus 252. Jordan Wright coming back at plus 252. Over-under set at 1.5 rounds. Over is plus 151. Under minus 151. So they're not expecting this one to last very long. Pauga 5-1, coming off the KO loss to Muhammad Usman, and Jordan Wright 12-4, coming off the loss to Dusko Todorovic. And this one, this was as greasy as it gets. I mean, you got Pauga coming down from heavyweight from the tough finale where he got knocked out by Usman. So, I mean, I don't think he was ever really planning on being a heavyweight, but that's just kind of what he needed to do to be on the show. So makes the move down to light heavyweight. He trains at a good camp in at Elevation with Curtis Blades. So I mean, he's getting some good rounds in there. I mean, his stand-up though is a little concerning. His hands are kind of low, and that kind of got exposed against Usman coming off that knockout. He's got pretty decent speed though. I don't know how well that'll translate to light heavyweight, but for a heavyweight, he was pretty fast, and he could pick his shots from the outside, land jabs, little 1-2s, a few combos here and there. But for the most part, just overall good movement on the feet. Jordan Wright coming up from middleweight in this fight. I don't know if that's his move now, but I mean, his last fight was at middleweight. He's kind of bounced around here and there. But if we look at his fights in the UFC, he has 6 fights in the UFC. He's 2-4. His only wins in the UFC are to Jamie Pickett, who we all know is getting fed to the wolves against Bo Nickel. Kind of tells you how the UFC feels about him. And then Ike Villanueva. So Ike, if you get the Ike treatment, you're getting a layup. Let's just say that.
Yep.
To be the nicest that I can be, you're getting a layup. So those are his only 2 wins. His losses: Joaquin Buckley, Bruno Silva, Marc-Andre Barrio, and Dusko Todorovic. Those names aren't terrible, but I mean, he's just not getting it done against like anybody else. So let's just be honest there. I mean, he's pretty much first round or bust. If you watch the way he fights, comes out there, maybe a little timid as in the first 30 seconds to a minute, but when he goes, and he does not stop. So in the UFC, he's only been to the second round twice, and when he got to the second round, he hasn't made it to a third round at all. I mean, he's pretty much first round of bust, and if he makes it to the second round, he's usually getting finished very quickly in that second round. So I want to get there with Jordan Wright, but him coming up to light heavyweight and just the fact that he's first round or bust, it hasn't really beaten anybody good. I can't really get there. So Zach Pauga is probably the pick, but I don't know that I would back him at, minus 250. That's pretty heavy chalk for a guy that has 6 martial arts fights and really hasn't fought anybody. So I'm probably going to lay off of this one. The under 1.5 is pretty juicy too, or like pretty chalky, I should say. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's one of those reverse plays where, Wright kind of gasses and Pauga just takes his time with them, and you hit the over for plus money, something like that. But it's a greasy fight, and I'll probably just lay off for the most part. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's super greasy because you look at Pauga coming off of the nasty KO loss to Muhammad Usman. I mean, out of nowhere, I thought he was kind of winning the fight, and then all of a sudden, dude, he gets caught with that shot, and it's hard to back a guy coming off of that brutal of a KO because you don't know about his chin going forward, all of that stuff. And Jordan Wright can get knockouts. I mean, he is powerful. He's aggressive at times. He just lets the hands go. He's either going to get clipped or clip you type of style.
Right.
Moving up, he's going to have to deal with that power a little bit more. And, if you watch Zach Pauga, he's pretty quick for his size. I mean, he is athletic and quick. So it's not like Jordan Wright's going to come up and have a, massive speed advantage. I expect this one to end pretty early, one way or the other. Pauga, we saw, has been able to, get knocked out and flatline. Jordan Wright, obviously 1-4 in his last 5 fights. And we've seen him, beat pretty damn badly. Like you said, if it gets out of the first round, it usually ends not in his favor in the second round. So yeah, I don't know. 2 big sluggers. I mean, you kind of have to stick on the side of Zach Pauga just from what we've seen from Jordan Wright. But at minus 245 coming off a brutal knockout, like I can't find a world where I'm taking that money line at all. If I'm going to play something here, it's got to be a knockout prop, right? I mean, I can't see this fight ending by decision. Jordan Wright, I don't think decision's ever been in his vocabulary. He's either going to get knocked out or he's going to go knock you out, usually in the first round. And when it does get in the second round, like I said, man, he's either, he's probably going to sleep. One, because he's tired, and 2, it just round 2 seems to be his downfall. So I like the under in this fight. I think both guys come out with something to prove because Jordan Wright, 1-4 in his last 5, he better get a win here, or we probably never see him in the UFC again. Zach Pauga, we had a lot of people talking about him being a super good fighter in the UFC, and he goes and gets flatlined. So both guys need this win. Both guys are going to want to do it in spectacular fashion. I would lean the under 1.5 in this fight. I just don't see it going past. I'd say the most it goes is 2 minutes into the second round, honestly. But I'm expecting a first round firework type of fight. But I'm going to stick on the side of Zach Pauga for the pick, just because I hate what I've seen out of Jordan Wright. Yeah,
and Jordan Wright's never been to a decision in his entire career. If you look at his last fight against Dusko, he landed like 60 some like strikes in the first round. It was like 60-5 in his favor in the first round. The next round, it was like the exact opposite, and he got finished. So I mean, he was just done at that point. If you like Pauga, like just take him inside the distance or take him by KO. Like just get that price down so you're not laying such heavy chalk that if he does get finished, you're not losing that much. Because it can't make it to decision. It just really can't. If it does, like whatever, man. Like I guess we're just that off. But
yeah.
Next fight, pretty much greasy one here. I mean, these are all greasy, but that's probably going to be the word of the show. Josh Parisian, Jamal Pogues. Parisian coming in at plus 220. Pogues making his debut at minus 220. Over under set at 2.5 rounds. Over minus 133. Plus 133 for the under. Parisian 3-2 in his last 5. Pogues 4-1. Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, it's kind of tough because you watch Pogues on the Contender Series and he got the decision win. I mean, he looked decent, but he didn't do anything that you're like, oh, that's a prospect for the heavyweight division in the UFC. So it's tough because I think Dana was in a good mood that night and he just gave everybody contracts. Like he did that so many times this last season. I don't know if the heavyweight division needs fighters or what, but he got a contract. He is taller. Josh Parisian, we've seen him get controlled on the ground. We've also seen him, get some takedowns of his own. And on the feet, he's not like this big flashy knockout artist, but he will hit you. He'll put the pressure on you, kind of grind out some victories, but he's also in some fights, I mean, he's got a chin. I watched him fight the other day, and I mean, in the first round, it looked like he was completely done, getting wobbled. He was getting ground and pounded, and then all of a sudden, he flips the tables in the second round, and he's getting his hand raised by finish. So Jamal Pogues, it's hard to back any UFC newcomer to me because you just don't know how they're going to handle the pressure at this level. You don't know, if they're even material for the UFC yet. And then you get a guy like Josh Parisian, who, I mean, he does have 3 wins in his last 5 fights. So, I mean, he does win, that percentage, a little bit over 50% of his fights lately. And yeah, I just don't know if I've seen enough of Jamal Pogues to lay that chalk on him too. I mean, over minus 200 against a guy that's been in the UFC a while, against a guy who has a ton of experience and is somewhat tough and durable and can take shots. Yeah, it's tough for me to take Jamal Pogues here. I'm actually going to lean Josh Parisian. I think that experience factor, he's going to know what to do if he's getting touched up in the first round. So, I mean, what we saw from Jamal Pogues on the Contender Series, he's he looks like a big, strong guy. I think he's probably a natural light heavyweight. I think he fought some of his fights at light heavyweight and just put on a ton of weight for heavyweight. But yeah, he didn't do it. I mean, if you're not getting as a heavyweight and you're not going out there on Contender Series and finishing these guys, right, I just don't see him getting a ton in the UFC either. He does have a decent takedown average. So, maybe he goes out there and takes down Josh Parisian and just dominates him on the ground. But I mean, I've seen Josh Parisian get up off his back and even hit little sweeps and find himself up on top as well. And if he gets on top of Jamal Pogues, he should have, again, that it comes down to that experience factor. He knows what he's doing on the ground. I think he can actually get some control time and land some ground and pound. So I think this fight should be a lot closer than the odds lead on. And for that reason, I'm going to lean Josh Parisian here. It's probably a risk. Jamal Pogues might shock us all and come out and be, prove he is a good heavyweight. I just don't see it right now with him. And it's hard to back a guy at those big odds if he's unproven and to the naked eye just doesn't look like he's going to be a big prospect or contender.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the same page. I mean, I get it. It's Josh Parisian, but how are you going to lay minus 220 on a heavyweight making his debut after watching? I mean, he had 2 Dana White Contender Series fights. So, I mean, it took him 2 tries to get a contract. First one was in 2019. That was at light heavyweight. And then he goes over to LFA, loses at light heavyweight, pretty much gets dominated by Alex Polizzi, who is a pretty good fighter in Bellator now.
Mm-hmm.
He won in LFA in his next fight in 2020 as a light heavyweight. And then pretty much 2 years off in 2022 last year, comes on Dana White Contender Series again as a heavyweight, weighs 248 and a half, and pretty much looks like a completely different dude. Like he puts him on over the pandemic. Let's just say that. Like, he put some stuff on. I can't really say he was in the gym or anything like that because it doesn't look like it. But Jamal Pogues, he just doesn't look like he's ever wanting to like finish a fight. I mean, he's like a one or two shots here and there on the feet. He'll get a takedown, not really try to do too much with it on the ground. I mean, he's been submitted on the ground before in Bellator. And I don't know how you could ever lay that chalk. Like, that's just ridiculous. In his fight, the second fight on the Contender Series against Paul Hanato Jr., he took 46 leg kicks in a 3-round fight. He took 46 of them. So what does that tell me? This guy is like just okay with taking shots. Like, I get it. They might not have hurt that much, but I mean, maybe you just have some massive legs. But if a guy kicks you a couple times in the legs, you're probably going to start checking him, or at least, picking your leg up or something. It just looked like he didn't care. Parisian, that's obviously a path that he could take. Just whip leg kicks in there and take his legs out from under him. But for the most part, Parisian just puts his head down and throws on the feet. It doesn't look like he has too much of a plan on the feet. He has a decent ground game, as you alluded to. A couple of sweeps. I mean, he'll look for that armbar as well. If he gets taken down, he'll look to advance position if he's on top. So I don't think Parisian's a terrible play by any means. Plus 220, you're getting pretty good money on middling heavyweights, and one that's taking on a guy making his debut, a guy that's been in the UFC for, I mean, he's had a few UFC fights. So 4 UFC fights. He's 2-2. His wins are against the bottom of the barrel, but they're wins. His losses: Parker Porter, Dontel Mays, and then a win against Alan Badeau and Roque Martinez. Like, from what I understand, like, there's just not a lot going on in the heavyweight division, and they kind of need guys. So I think that's maybe why Jamal Pogues went with the heavyweight route to get that chance in the UFC. And I just don't think, I mean, he was a light heavyweight. Like, you just kind of gave up on making the weight, and now you're a heavyweight. And it's not like you're some potent finisher at light heavyweight. You're not going to be a potent finisher at heavyweight at all. So yeah, we'll be done with that one because that's greasy. But I like Parisian too as an underdog. I just cannot get to Pogues at minus 220. The next fight, William Knight and Marcin Prachnio. Speaking of dudes that are big, William Knight minus 110 here. Prachnio comes back at plus 110. Over under set at 2.5 rounds. Plus 147 for the over, and under sitting at minus 147. Both guys 2-3 in their last 5. But man, if we take a deeper dive, for Will Knight, the guy is super strong. I mean, he weighed in his last fight at 251. He weighed in at 251 in his last fight against Devin Clark. That was last April. And if you check out his Instagram since then, he looks like he has taken a lot of control over his weight. I mean, he's kind of gotten everything dialed in, and he looks more shredded now. He's going to make that weight at 205. That's pretty much been his problem, like making the weight at 205. And then at heavyweight, like he's 5'10", and he doesn't necessarily have like great grappling or anything. He's just a strong dude all around. Not necessarily the most talented mixed martial artist, but he can be a weight bully, and that's probably his path to victory here. Like, he's going to need to throw hard and push his weight on Prachnio. If we look at Prachnio, just a very up and down fighter, I would say. He's shown like some decent stuff on the feet, karate background. I mean, if it's a kickboxing match, I would take Prachnio. He throws a lot of kicks to the legs, to the body, to the head. His only wins in the past 2 years are to Ike Villanueva and Khalil Roundtree, which is interesting. But he got it done as a plus 290 underdog, but we all know Roundtree's up and down. He took a little time off, and then came back against Felipe Lins, lost that fight back last April. So got the loss there. Both guys coming off a loss. Both guys kind of need a win to stay in the UFC, or at least solidify their spot. I don't really like betting on these type of spots because, I mean, it's probably pretty fair, but it's just who implements their game plan more. In the smaller cage, though, I would probably favor Will Knight. I mean, the guy takes up a lot of space in that octagon, and he's not necessarily easy to knock out. And he kind of had to have an accumulation of damage against Devin Clark. But I'd probably lean Will Knight just because he can, if he wants to implement that game plan, he has a better chance of doing it. So I'm going to go with that.
You look at Prachnio, and he looks like, I mean, just his build, size, everything. He looks like a world beater. And then he gets in there, man, and he's losing these fights to guys that, I mean, he should be beating. I mean, you named his only 2 wins lately, and he's lost to guys like Felipe Lins, who's on this card as well. Who else is it? Mike Rodriguez. I mean, Magomed Ankalaev, whatever. But then the loss to Sam Alvey. It's like, all the love to Sam Alvey, but Sam Alvey doesn't have a ton of wins in the last 5-6 years in the UFC. and now he's not in the UFC. So, I mean, it makes me nervous going in there against a guy with all the power like Will Knight, a guy who, if he wants, could probably get you up against the cage, kill time, get some control time, but is overall just super dangerous and super powerful. So, yeah, I just can't get behind Prachnio right now. The line is basically pick 'em, -110 Will Knight. Um, that's a side I would lean at right now, but I honestly thinking about it, I'm interested to see what the Will Knight by knockout prop is gonna be when it comes out, because I could see the fight ending that way. I mean, Prachnio, he lost to Mike Rodriguez by TKO, Magomed Ankalaev TKO, Sam Alvey by knockout. And then he went the decision with Felipe Lins. Those are his losses recently. So yeah, man, I think a guy with as much power like Will Knight is just going to take one shot. That knockout's going to be live the whole entire fight. And believe it or not, Will Knight, for a guy that big, he's gone to decision quite a few times lately too, and gotten wins by decision. So I mean, he can go all 3 rounds, and cutting down to light heavyweight. Maybe he's got a little bit more energy. He's got a little bit more stamina. He's not carrying all that weight. So, yeah, man, on this fight, I see a lot more on the Will Knight side than I like on the Prachnio side. So, yeah, that's going to be my pick for this one by knockout.
Yeah, he's just got to throw, enter, throw his weight on him, get him up against the cage, and just make him carry his weight and use his strength. He just cannot sit back at kicking range. He'll get picked apart.
I agree.
Jim Miller and Alexander Hernandez. Miller coming in at +208. Alexander Hernandez -208. Odds courtesy of BetOpenly. Over/under set at 1.5 rounds, -133 for the over, +133 for the under. Alexander Hernandez coming off the loss to Billy Q. And then Jim Miller coming off the win to Donald Cerrone. So both guys are, I mean, Jim Miller's 39, kind of at a different stage in his career. Alexander Hernandez has beaten quite a few decent guys. I mean, he's beaten Beneil Dariush. He's been around in the UFC for a little bit, and he's kind of up and down. He's just kind of got like some cardio problems. He'll go for it and then gas himself out if he doesn't get it. He'll mix in the wrestling here and there. Taking this fight on late notice, though, that is kind of a big thing because with a guy for cardio problems. But Jim Miller, he's been around forever. He's pretty well-rounded, good subs, good leg kicks, always a live dog, and he's sitting at +208. Are you taking the bait on that one?
I don't know, man. You look at so Alexander Hernandez is like, you watch him in the octagon and he's like a specimen. He's super athletic, super built, and everything's always going right until it's not with him. It's like, okay, this is going to be the one he bounces back and gets the big win, and then he, with the Billy Q fight, gets TKO'd. I mean, he was winning that first round against Billy Q, and we all know Billy Q is going to be fighting for the whole duration of the fight. But yeah, man, ever since, I feel like with Hernandez, ever since that Cerrone loss, something's changed in my opinion. He's not quite the same. He's always fired up, ready to fight. But I mean, against a guy like Jim Miller, who's tough and who has, I mean, hours and hours of UFC octagon time, it does make me a little bit nervous for him, because we've seen Jim Miller finish fights by any way he wants. I want to say he's got I know he's got a ridiculous amount of submissions, knockouts. He's got 6 knockouts, 19 submissions, 10 decision wins. So, I mean, that just tells you there he gets it done by any way possible. He's super well-rounded. So I really do want to take the dog in this one. I'm going to wait as the week goes on, see what the line does a little bit, check the numbers, check where the money's coming in. But for my pick, it's a close one. Even though Hernandez is a over -200 favorite, I want to lean Jim Miller so bad, because Hernandez just always finds a way to lose these fights, it seems like. And Jim Miller has been in there so much and has so much experience and knows what he's doing anywhere this fight goes. I'm going to stick with Jim Miller. I think he could surprise some people this week. So yeah, that's going to be the pick.
Yeah, this one's tough.
It's tough, though. It's tough from a betting standpoint. I don't know if the money line on either side is the right play, to be honest. But for the pick, I got to stick with Miller. I got a feeling about him.
Yeah, I mean, if you like Alexander Hernandez, probably take him inside the distance or even around 1 or 2. Because the guy, I mean, he had Billy Q like bleeding.
Yeah.
It cut him bad on the ground with an elbow, and very easily could have finished that fight in round 1. And then comes back round 2 and kind of gasses out, takes a bunch of damage, and they wave it off. But Jim Miller, like, he's on a 3-fight win streak.
3
Not
finishes
against,
too.
yeah, 3 finishes, not against the greatest competition. Eric Gonzalez, Nicholas Mata, and Donald Cerrone. Um, but yeah, I mean, he's a live dog. He's always a live dog, and I don't want to be on the wrong side of that, you know. So I don't know. Maybe it's probably going to be, a prop play. I wouldn't, like you said, it's probably not a money line either way. But it kind of makes me wonder, like, why did Alexander Hernandez take this fight? I mean, considering he just fought at 145, he's kind of bounced around at 45 and 55. So, I mean, taking this fight at 155 makes sense because he's taking it at short notice, not going to have to cut all the weight. But why is he taking this fight? Because, a win over Jim Miller, what does that really do for you? Probably not a lot. I mean, he was taking on top contenders. I mean, he was fighting Hanato Moicano last year at this time, who's, not, I wouldn't say a top contender, but I mean, he's a bigger name, or at least was ranked. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a weird spot for both fighters. What does a win against Alexander Hernandez do for Jim Miller? Jim Miller was supposed to fight Gabriel Benitez. Benitez withdrew. So he's getting a tougher opponent here. What does that do for Jim Miller? I mean, Jim Miller doesn't have like title aspirations. Like he's just trying to stick around for UFC 300. That's pretty much what I'm understanding. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a weird spot. I don't really like either side on the money line, as you said. It's probably going to be a prop play. Maybe take the under. I don't know. Or maybe take the over. I don't really like anything in this fight. It's just so weird to me. Unfortunately, I'm not going to sit here and lie and give you a side, but I just don't really like any side. But we'll keep an eye on the props as they come out during the week and see what looks good as far as the value. The fight we all asked for, bantamweight bout between Lena Lansberg and Maeda Bueno Silva. I'm a little surprised Lena Lansberg's still in the UFC. 10-7. I mean, she's 40 years old. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you still in the UFC? I'm sorry, but you could. I mean, you just gotta have the love for the game at that point. She's 2-3 in her last 5. Comes in this one as a plus 415 underdog. Maeda Bueno Silva comes back at minus 415. 3-1-1 in her last 5. Coming off the submission win against Stephanie Edgar. Over under set at 2.5 rounds. Minus 147 for the over. Plus 147 for the under. Odds courtesy of BetOpenly. What do you like in this one? You taking
Not a lot. I can't get to the dog here. I just, at 40 years old, Lena, she does have some knockouts on her record. I think she's got 4 KOs on her record and then six decision wins. So those are her wins right there. She's also been knocked out 3 times and she's never been submitted. So that's what kind of makes it tough to me, because I think Bueno Silva, is used to, she gets all these arm bars and submissions, and when she gets it on the ground, she just grinds until she finds some kind of sub. But against Lena, she's never been submitted, so that makes me a tad bit worried, because if I am going to play a play on this fight, it's not going to be the money line for the favorite here at over minus 400. It would be Bueno Silva by submission. But Lena, a little bit older, that makes me feel better. Bueno Silva, that nasty armbar against Stephanie Edgar in her last fight. That's what I would lean right now. I'm interested to see what the odds are, because if it's close to even money for that, I don't even know if I could get there, just because Lena's never been submitted. I might look at a decision prop for Bueno Silva. I just don't see Lena going out there and beating Bueno Silva in this one, especially at her age. 3-fight losing streak. But, women's MMA can be extremely weird. it can be unforgiving. You could have a massive play that you think is going to hit because this girl hasn't lost in 3 fights. She's been submitting everybody. And then the girl she's fighting hasn't won in 3 fights. And then she goes out there and gets flatlined. So you just never know. But Bueno Silva's the pick. By submissions, what I'm leaning. I'm going to look at that decision prop as well when it comes out. But yeah, just kind of a non-appealing fight in this one, in my opinion.
You mentioned Lansberg had some knockouts, but you failed to mention that was 7 years ago when she was 33. Little spring chicken, 33-year-old Lena Lansberg knocking people out. But since then, she is 4-7. And she or 4-6, I should say. It just doesn't really look good for her at this point. 3 straight losses. Sarah McMahon lost to Penny Kianzad and a lost to Carol Hosa, which she got a point for because she got kneed in the face. But yeah, I don't know. These spots are just super greasy because it's lower level women's MMA and bantamweights at that. So I mean, a little bit more finishing ability for the bigger girls, but Lansberg hasn't been able to do that in a while. Bueno Silva got a lot of submission threats, a lot of armbar finishes. She got pretty decent stand-up. She came into the UFC as a flyweight and then made the move to bantamweight in 2022, and she's 2-0 now. So fighting out of shoot to box. So she's got that Charles Oliveira style that they all kind of really do. Aggressive on the feet, will take one to give one. So if this fight is a stand-up battle, I would give the edge to Bueno Silva, but that's probably not her easiest path to victory. Her easiest path to victory would get the takedowns. Lena Lansberg is pretty easy to take down at this point in her career. She's got 48% career takedown defense, so not very good. But Bueno Silva doesn't really look for the takedowns. She's really a stand-up girl until she's on the ground, and then she's got good submission threats if she's there. Like in her last fight, Stephanie Egger, great judo martial artist or judo athlete, we'll say, I guess, gets her to the ground, and then she snatches up the armbar. And I don't know. I mean, what's the game plan for Bueno Silva? That's kind of my question here. Because if it's a stand-up battle, I don't like that really going to a decision with that ticket for women's MMA.
Right.
But the props you mentioned, by submission or by decision, definitely be looking at that. But yeah, just moving forward with this fight. Like you said, Lansberg hasn't been submitted, but we also saw that Luke Boonmay had never had a submission last week.
True.
And Elise Reed had never been submitted. So maybe they give us a little bit better price on that. So something to keep an eye on, but Bueno Silva's the pick, and the props is probably the move in that one. Yeah. Jamal Emmers, Kusin Askhabov, I think that's how you say it, making his debut, 23-0, sitting at -120. Jamal Emmers comes back at +120. 18-6 for him. Over under sitting at 2.5 rounds, -110 for the over, +110 for the under. This Askhabov guy, I mean, he has like over 3 million followers on Instagram. I don't know if you've checked that out, but
it's a big deal in Russia.
This guy is known. He is known, and it seems like it was kind of a long time coming for him to be in the UFC. I mean, he's got 2 belts in his Tapology picture, so. Training out of American Top Team and Tiger Muay Thai, kind of bounces back and forth, but the guy is pretty much all action. I mean, he's a pretty violent dude on the feet, and if he gets you to the ground, he's looking for that sub. So I mean, he's aggressive. He looks for the finishes, and he's gotten 3 straight finishes in his last 3 fights. The problem is, he hasn't fought since 2020. So what does he look like now? What is he improved? And his last fight was in road to WWFC against a guy who's 3-0. So is this a padded record at 23-0, or is it a fair record? I don't really know. I mean, I went back and watched the fights that were available, and pretty much saw what I just told you. I mean, he's aggressive. Maybe he's just that much better against than these guys, that he could just go out there and be aggressive, and he doesn't really feel any sense of a threat. But it's hard to pick against a guy that's never lost. It looks like he's been at the UFC PI for a little bit, and he's getting a lot of training in there. His last weigh-in was at bantamweight, and this one is set to be at featherweight. So maybe put on a little muscle in that time off since 2020. For Jamal Emmers, I mean, he's kind of been up and down, but his losses in the UFC are not bad. I can't really knock him for that. Pat Sabatini lost to Giga Chikadze, but his win in the UFC, he was a minus 550 favorite against Vince Cachero. So I can't really put too much stock in that. His Dana White Contender Series fight was back in 2018. He lost to Julian Erosa via head kick. He does have a win over Corey Sandhagen, which is definitely something to be proud about. I mean, he beat a guy who's has fought for the interim title. So there's that. He's also beaten Alexander Hernandez. So, I mean, he can beat some pretty top level competition. So, I mean, something to definitely take into account if you're looking to play him or play against him. But maybe that's why this line isn't very wide. I would think undefeated Russian guy coming in would be somewhat of a big favorite, but Jamal Emmers looks like he's getting the respect, at least somewhat of a respect. I wasn't necessarily that impressed watching him on film after rewatching a couple fights. He's athletic, he's long, mixes it up, pretty good ground game, pretty good takedowns. It's explosive. But at this point, it's like, you gonna say that he loses 23-0? Like, I don't know. 23-0 Russian. I just can't really seem to get there to take Emmers against him. I kind of want him because he's probably going to be a really popular pick this week.
Yeah.
Just be honest.
People see that record, and yeah,
there's probably going to be a lot of money on him too. So I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I want to be in the opposite side, but because I'm at minus 120. It's like it's super playable. So I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think it's going to be a close fight. I really do. Jamal Emmers making his UFC debut against Giga Chikadze went all the way to split decision. So he can hang on the feet. It's just going to be if he can stay off his back in this fight, in my opinion. I mean, you look at this UFC newcomer. I'm not even going to Askhabov. We're just going to call him Askhabov. You watch him in some of his tapes in the lower level promotions. I mean, he's got a ton of submissions. He's obviously aggressive, can get fights to the ground. But I mean, Jamal Emmers has submission wins. He's got decision wins. He's got knockout wins. I mean, he is a well-rounded mixed martial artist. So I'm glad this line is closer than I thought it was going to be. At least I thought, a 23-0 Russian kid coming in was going to be a minus 250 favorite against Jamal Emmers. And I think the line is close to where it should be here. But again, man, Jamal Emmers has hung around with some great fighters, and he's beaten some good fighters. Like you mentioned, Corey Sandhagen back in 2017. His UFC debut right before COVID in March of 2020. He went to split decision with Giga Chikadze. I can never say his name. Lost to, Pat Sabatini by heel hook. That submission loss does make me a little bit nervous because if Askhabov comes out there and he is, what he's cracked up to be, he could very well find the submission on the ground. But yeah, I think it could be a close fight. Again, it's all just going to come down to who's got the sharper grappling, in my opinion. On the feet, though, Jamal Emmers could do some work against him. I mean, this guy hasn't, if you look at his record, Askhabov hasn't really fought any outstanding strikers. You watch him in his tape, he's not really fighting any outstanding strikers. So this one could be interesting. I think a lot of people expect Askhabov to win because of the record 23-0. It's super impressive, but I don't think you can count out Jamal Emmers here. If I have to take a pick, I am going to stay on the side of Askhabov because I do think eventually that wrestling will wear Emmers out to the point where he's not dangerous anymore. But if we see a finish in this fight, I don't know. Man. It could go either way. I wouldn't be surprised if this one just grinds out to a decision, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, man, I see it.
I'm thinking like these guys, from what I've seen, watching these guys, they fight pretty aggressive. And
Yeah.
when on the feet, like they leave themselves open to some shots. The over under at 2.5, like that seems like a pretty good price on the under there, plus 110. That's something to keep an eye on. I'll definitely keep an eye on it. Maybe look at the money spreads and everything, see where the money is. But yeah, should be an exciting fight actually.
No, I think so.
Two guys that pretty solid. The next fight, light heavyweight bout between OSP, Oven St. Preux, plus 200 there, and minus 200 coming back on Felipe Lins. Over under set at 2.5 rounds. Over minus 115, under plus 115. 2-3 in OSP's last 5. 3-2 in Felipe Lins' past 5. What do you like in this one?
In this one, I got to stick with Felipe Lins. Something about taking these older guys, hasn't panned out lately. You got Shogun Rua, who just lost. I just don't – guys that are on their way out of the UFC, I'm not saying Open St. Preux doesn't have anything left in the tank, but he's not the same OSP that we saw 10 years ago by any means. And Felipe Lins he's a strong guy. He's got wins on his record. I'm trying to compare him. I know that they both fought – hold on one second. Let me pull it up. Felipe Lins has a win over Shogun Rua, I believe, and Open St. Preux has a loss somewhat recently. I'll make sure I'm not making that up.
Yeah.
Or it might be the other way around, actually.
Is it Prachnio? Could be Prachnio.
I think I'm thinking of Prachnio, yeah. It was just OSP over Shogun Rua. But bottom line, I never can get around to backing these guys that are 39, 40 years old, have records with a ton of fights on them, who have a ton of damage taken, kind of like OSP. Felipe Lins, I think, strong enough to keep this thing on the feet. Open St. Preux does have a good submission game. But at the end of the day, I just can't get behind the older guys that are kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Any fight that they lose in the next coming fight could be their retirement fight. And Felipe Lins has some decent wins on his record. He's also lost the guys he shouldn't have lost. But for the sake of the pick, I got to stick with Felipe Lins here.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. Look at Felipe Lins. Goes to the PFL, wins the $1 million tournament, and then comes into the UFC in 2020 and loses to Andre Arlovsky, loses to Tanner Boser as a heavyweight, both of those fights. Then has 6 canceled bouts between 2020 and 2021. Finally makes it back in 2022 as a light heavyweight. Looks like a totally different guy. Looks like he's in shape. Looks like he probably ran out of money, and he's like, all right, I need to get in shape and win some more fights here. Comes up as a win against Marcin Prachnio, unanimous decision win. Looked pretty good in that fight, I will say that. Has another canceled bout against Grisham and OSP, and then ultimately gets another shot at OSP here. So it looks like they want this matchup for some reason. He mixes it up on the feet. He has pretty good power. Coming down from heavyweight, and then he'll mix it up, go for some takedowns. He's going to need good pressure in this fight, though. We all know OSP is going to stand at range. Loves those teep kicks. That fight with Shogun Rua in his last one, he put his foot in Shogun Rua's belly like time after time after time. And he got a split decision win against Shogun Rua. So if you look at Shogun's last fight, that split decision win doesn't age too well. And then 2 losses before that to Tanner Boser and Jamal Hill. So, yeah, I got to go with Felipe Lins as well. But I wouldn't get too invested. Maybe look for him inside the distance or something like that. OSP got finished in his 2 fights before the Shogun Rua fight. So, yeah, at this point, he's 39 years old. What does he really have to fight for at this point? Felipe Lins, probably a little bit more of a future to him. He's 37, but he's coming to a new weight class, so he might want to make a little bit more of a move there. So I'll take Felipe Lins for the pick. On the money line, though, it's just not great. Like it's tough to trust a fighter that has been so up and down in his career. Nazim Sadykhov and Evan Elder in a lightweight bout here. Sadykhov coming in at minus 168. Elder plus 168. Over under set at 2.5 rounds. Minus 115 for the over, plus 115 for the under. 7-1. Or both guys are 7-1. Sadykhov coming off his win in the Contender Series, and Elder coming off a loss in his debut. So both guys pretty young. Sadykhov looked really good in his fight on the Contender Series. He's aggressive, powerful. He looks to stand and bang with you, but I mean, he's pretty solid on the ground as well. The only thing that makes me scared about taking him here is he can get hit on the feet. In his Contender Series fight against Ahmad Suhal Hassanzada, I mean, he got the round 3 knockout, but I mean, he took a good amount of shots. Hassanzada is 9-1 and training out of Team Alpha Male. I mean, the guy's a good fighter, but Sadykhov came in as the favorite and looked like the favorite. Got the better of him in the exchanges, but Sadykhov did get hit here and there. And watching film on him as well, he's been hit before, let's just say that. But he's never been finished. He's never been knocked out. He's been finished by a rear naked choke in his first ever pro fight. But if he stands and bangs with you, you're probably not going to beat him. If we look at Evan Elder, lost in his debut, didn't look the best. I mean, that was at welterweight, so I mean, he's coming down to lightweight where he normally was before this. So took that fight at welterweight and pretty much got babied like by Preston Parsons. Was getting taken down, couldn't get off his back really for most of the fight. Training at a good camp in Killcliff FC, but a young guy, so he's probably still developing and could look like a different fighter in this one. So that scares me a little bit because, younger fighters make a lot bigger strides between, fights that happen. And his last fight was last April. So, I mean, he's had 10 months to really improve himself there. Sadykhov, we just saw him last summer. I mean, he looked good. And I like him this week. I like Sadykhov. I think he's got a good future in the UFC. But Evan Elder could show us something. So that makes me a little bit hesitant. But I'm going to go with Sadykhov in this one just for the finishing ability. Looks like he wants that finish a little bit more. And I don't like my fighters going to a decision because we all know how that can play out. So I like the guy with a little bit more finishing ability in this one. It's not a terrible price either, minus 160 around there. So I'll take Sadykhov. What do you think?
No, I like it. And yeah, you kind of hit it on the head. Like on his Contender Series fight, he showed, I don't want to say holes in his striking because offensively, he reminds me of like a Javid Basharat. He's got good spinning kicks. He does good body work, and he's a solid striker, but he does get hit a little bit. And Evan Elder has some finishes on the feet, knockouts, TKOs, wins by knees. I mean, Evan Elder isn't necessarily no slouch on the feet, but just based off of Evan Elder's performance when he got into the UFC, I just don't see him going in there and outstriking a guy like Nazim Sadykhov, because Sadykhov, like you touched on his finishing ability. In fights like this, you don't want to be holding the ticket going to the decision at the beginning of the card, because we've seen it time and time again where these UFC judges aren't exactly accurate, and when you got two strikers, especially, sometimes it's kind of a gray area on who these judges thought won. You could see a guy that looks like he dominated on the feet or got the better of him, kind of like the Zubara Tukov and Elvis Brenner fight last week. And then all of a sudden the judge is reading off the opposite name of the ticket you're holding. So, yeah, as far as a finisher, I think Nazim Sadykhov is more of a consistent finisher. He's definitely got the ability. And, both guys, it's tough because we haven't seen them lose a lot of fights. So it's kind of hard to gauge, where they're most vulnerable, like whether it's the feet or the ground. I think, Sadykhov lost his first professional fight by rear naked choke and then rattled off 7 wins in a row and a lot of knockouts. So that kind of makes me feel a little bit better. For the pick, I got to go Sadykhov. Kind of waiting to see what that KO prop's going to be. Because, I mean, the striking does look really slick. He does find the chin a lot. But on the same side, it's like if the KO prop for Evan Elder's, decent enough too, it might be worth a little sprinkle there. But as the week goes on, I think we'll see some good movement in this line. We'll kind of be able to gauge which side you should be on more. But for right now, it's got to be Nazim Sadykhov for me.
I like it. AJ Fletcher taking on the newcomer Themba Gorimbo. 10-3 for Gorimbo, making his debut, plus 240 for Gorimbo, minus 240 for AJ Fletcher. Over under set at 2.5 rounds, plus 115 for the over, minus 115 for the under. AJ Fletcher, he came into the UFC off of the Contender Series. He had that flying knee knockout in the first round, which everybody loved. He came in having all finishes except one. So he was 9-0 and had 8 finishes. Comes into the UFC against Semmelsberger, loses a decision there, and then loses against Andrade at UFC 278 last summer, and kind of exposed him in a way that you can get him tired. And for Andrade, he really just had to weather the storm in that second round, which was no easy task, and almost got finished. Like Fletcher almost finished him for sure, but Andrade was able to battle through it and hold on, and then win the decision because Fletcher was gassed out. Was at altitude though, so I will give him a little bit of a pass there. A lot of people were, gassing out in that fight or in that card, but he kind of gets hit a lot. Like, watching the Semmelsberger fight and the Losa fight, on the feet, he's dangerous, but he gets hit a lot. Like, he has to take one to give one, and he can get taken down. I mean, he's an explosive athlete. That's really what he is. He's an athlete. He probably should move down to 155 if he can. I mean, at 5'10", he's kind of a ball of muscle for welterweight. But yeah, it's tough to get there to be that big of a favorite. But then I watched Themba Gorimbo, and I wasn't really that impressed watching him on film. There's not a ton of it out there, but just watching him against Henderson Ferreira, his loss in the UAE Warriors 24 back in 2021, he got like handled pretty much. He got out wrestled and he didn't even have a chance in that fight. It didn't even seem like that. But then gets a decision win in Fury FC last summer, and then gets a chance in the UFC here. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, it seems like they're bringing this guy in to fill a spot and maybe setting Fletcher up with a win here, because they like the guy. He's probably pretty marketable. I mean, he's friends with Dustin Poirier. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's 0-2 in the UFC. He kind of needs a win. Like, let's just be honest. You come into the UFC, lose your first 2 fights, you kind of need to win your third one to, have any kind of negotiating power going into a contract. So I'll take Fletcher for the pick. You're better off taking him inside the distance or something, because if it goes past, the second round, I don't really like his cardio, and he could get taken down here. I mean, Gorimbo is no small 170er. I mean, he's 6 foot, 76-inch reach. That is another thing to highlight in this one. Look at their reaches. 76-inch reach for Gorimbo, 67 for AJ Fletcher. So it's not, you're giving up 9 inches in reach. And for a guy that already gets hit a lot, he might have to take this to the ground himself, or at least be aggressive enough to get on the inside. He's going to have to. He's really going to have to, but he might open himself up to getting taken down. So, again, a greasy fight. A greasy fight. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that scares me is Gorimbo's length. I mean, like you just touched on the reach. if it stays on the feet, I think AJ Fletcher is going to have problems finding the chin and closing that gap. But if AJ Fletcher can just get his hands locked in the clinch, you know that he can take Gorimbo down. But, I mean, Gorimbo is long. He's got Darce chokes on his record. He's got, I mean, he can find submissions. He's been submitted as well. Doesn't find a bunch of knockouts. So, I mean, that's one thing. If he was this big knockout artist, I think he's only got, let's see. I think, did I read right? He's got one knockout on his professional record.
Yep, one.
Yeah, so I mean, if he was this big knockout artist, it would make me feel a lot better, laying some money on him. Maybe he was long enough, he could keep the distance, pick AJ Fletcher apart from the outside, maybe find a knockout with that power. But I'm just not seeing it. I think his only chance to win the fight is if AJ Fletcher is going in for a double leg or up against the fence, and he uses his size and his reach and uses those long arms and somehow snatches up a neck. But I just think you look at the level of competition, AJ Fletcher's last 2 losses are much better than the guys that Gorimbo's fighting in his other promotions. So I think AJ Fletcher just needs to get in close one time, get this thing to the ground, possibly find a submission of his own. Gorimbo's been submitted before. On the ground, I think, is where we're going to see a big discrepancy in skill. On the feet, I think it could look close just because of that reach advantage, the size advantage. But at some point, you have to think that AJ Fletcher is going to get in close enough to get the takedown. And for the sake of the pick, it's got to be AJ Fletcher. I can't really get there on the money line either, just because Gorimbo is somewhat dangerous with the chokes. And, if it's going to be that style of fight, he could maybe snatch up something at some point. But, right now, for the sake of the pick, AJ Fletcher is the side I'm going to be on.
Can't argue with that. Juan Camilo Ronderos taking on Clayton Carpenter. Carpenter coming in at minus 262. Ronderos plus 262. Over under set at 2.5 rounds. Plus 147 for the over and minus 147 for the under. Juan Camilo 4-1 in his last 5 because he's only had 5 professional bouts. 5-0 for Clayton Carpenter, 6-0 in his career. Couple of young fighters, flyweights here. This is greasy as it gets, too. I mean, you look at the weight classes in the UFC. Flyweights are greasy, heavyweights are greasy. And in this one, it's just only gets greasier. Like Juan Camilo Ronderos comes into the UFC on short notice against David Dvorak, gets subbed in the first round. If you look at his other 4 fights, split decision win in 2019 in his fight before that to Eric Shelton, who had been in the UFC. I just watched it today. Like I thought he completely lost that fight. I don't know how he won that fight, but got the win nonetheless and gets a shot in the UFC. A couple of chokes on his record, so 2 wins by submission. Overall, it's just not that impressive. I mean, he's 5'4", doesn't really offer too much on the feet. Really looks to grab a hold of you or something like that. Like, I don't know. Just watching him on film, I just don't see a lot of strengths to his game. For Clayton Carpenter, I don't know what to think of him. I mean, watching him on the Contender Series, he looked pretty hittable. He fights pretty wild. Maybe that's just because he was on the Contender Series and he wanted to make a statement and get a finish or something like that. But he left himself open a little bit. He had a huge welt under his eye. He will look for the takedown, though. That's really what he looks for in the most part. But when he starts the rounds, or when he starts round 1 at least, I mean, he comes out swinging. Kind of settles into it a little bit. But, yeah, it's kind of like the same position you're in as far as like low level heavyweights. It's like I just don't feel good laying chalk like that against for low level flyweights. I mean, these are 2 entry level dudes and 2 dudes that I don't really see having a future in the division. But Carpenter fights out of a good camp at MMA Labs. So does Ronderos at Extreme Couture. So both guys are fairly young as well. I'll give them that. Maybe they're still tuning up their skills. Both guys mid to late 20s. But at this price, I just would not feel good about either side. I think Carpenter is the pick for sure. But, like, how confident can you be? He's sitting at minus 262. So it's not terrible, but I just wouldn't really want to lay the chalk on that. I just don't. Ronderos doesn't really do it for me very much. You have more upside with Carpenter. He's a rightful favorite, but I just still don't feel good about it. What about you?
No, I'm on the same side. Like, these guys are so inexperienced that anything could happen at any one of their fights at this level. But, just watching, kind of comparing them side by side, Clayton Carpenter, the aggressiveness, I do think he could come out from the beginning of the fight and kind of overwhelm Ronderos. I think Carpenter is a guy that has maybe more upside and potential, and a guy that we could see get better, like in those gaps where he's not fighting. Just got a win on the Contender Series. Now he's time to lock in and get ready for the UFC. So I think we could see him just start sharpening his skills every time we see him in the octagon. Again, a guy that from MMA Labs is young enough to where, all of these fights, he's going to learn something in. I bet he learned a lot in his last Contender Series fight, and just he's going to use that going forward. I think the upside for him is a lot more. I think the UFC wants Clayton Carpenter to win over Ronderos. I mean, you would think there's more marketability there. So yeah, I think he's going to come out there with the pressure. He's going to overwhelm him, get the takedown. And I do think on the ground and on the feet, I do think there's a slight skill gap just from like watching both of these guys' past fights. Ronderos has some good submissions, but I mean, the competition he fought, especially early in his career to get those first couple of wins, it wasn't really the greatest or the highest. I guess the same could somewhat be said for Carpenter. But just comparing the two side by side, man, I think Clayton Carpenter is a rightful favorite. Maybe not this big because it's, these guys are so inexperienced. But yeah, for the pick, it's got to be Carpenter. I do think he could find a finish here too. I don't think Ronderos is, this guy that's indestructible and, can't get finished. I think he very well could. I think he very well could in this fight. Sake of the pick, got to be Clayton Carpenter in my opinion, though.
Yeah, I mean, if you like Carpenter, I would probably take him inside the distance. Could get it done either way, but maybe better off with a KO prop. Over under, I mean, that flyweight unders just seem to be pretty good. They just seem to be the way to go. But that's about it for this card. I mean, that was 11 fights. And I can't say many of them are that exciting. A couple ones on here. Obviously the newcomer Askhabov. And then the main event. But other than that, it is what it is. But we just got to hold on till March and we don't get these Apex cards anymore. And we get some fans in the seats to watch it with. So that's it for this episode. If, as always, I mean, these are our preview predictions this is Tuesday. So by Friday and Saturday, they're usually a little bit different. And obviously we didn't give out any bets because we haven't made any bets or we don't have any leans. But if you want those bets, you can get them at the Double Leg Premium. Or if you just want the bets for this week, you can get those when they're available Friday night into Saturday morning. Those will be available for $9.99, one-time purchase there. But all that'll be in the description. Again, join that Facebook group so you can get a chance to win the weekly giveaway at the Double Leg on all the social medias. If you're watching here on YouTube, please leave a subscription down below. At HeyJaiPicks on the medias for me. Where can they find you?
TikTok, The Parlay, Instagram, The Parlay_media, and Twitter and YouTube, The Parlay MMA.
All right. We'll be back recapping the weekend. Till then, the Double Leg out.